Hi, I'm attorney Eric Lewis with Lewis Legal Services in Indianapolis. Today I have an update with the new National Means Test numbers recently released by the Department of Justice that go into effect on May 15, 2024. In my previous video, we talked about the changes that went into effect as of April 1st for these Indiana-specific household median income numbers, so I'm not going to get into that as they are not changing at this time. The means test is used in bankruptcy to determine eligibility in Chapter 7 and how much you're expected to pay back on your debts in Chapter 13 cases. The means test uses certain standardized numbers that we call the National Living Allowance, which is based on your household size and for some things like housing and utility expenses, where you live. There are other expenses, of course, that you can take in a means test for Chapter 7 or a determination of disposable income in Chapter 13, numbers that are unique to you, such as a certain amount of charitable contributions that you make or retirement contributions, what you pay for life insurance or health insurance. But some of these numbers, as you can see, these numbers are set by law. And there can be some deviation for necessary expenses, but this is basically the expectation. And these numbers apply to all consumer bankruptcy cases, not just those filed in Indiana. So for consumer bankruptcy cases, these are the new numbers. For these particular categories, there are basically these numbers are derived from the IRS, and the bankruptcy court uses them more or less as a guide to determine if your deductions from income are both reasonable and necessary. Now, we all know with ongoing inflation and the cost of living, expenses have skyrocketed over the last few years, and your dollar simply doesn't stretch as far as it used to. And people who file bankruptcy are entitled to live and be able to pay for certain necessities before they consider their ability to pay debts, like credit cards and other liabilities. But let's take a look at these changes. This is inexplicable to me that the deductions one can take as an individual have gone down in almost every category. Overall, for these particular categories, you could take $841 in deductions, but effective May 15th, that number goes down to $808. Now, here's where it kind of gets weird. For two people, which could be, let's say, a married couple or one person with one kid, the numbers went slightly up. But when you add a third person, the numbers in some categories went slightly down. So these are the numbers we have to work with. And when we look at eligibility in Chapter 7, or what someone may or may not be able to afford to pay in a Chapter 13, one has to ask, if the court is charged with determining reasonable and necessary expenses, how reasonable are these numbers? For example, I went back and looked at what the total was for these expenses for a single individual in 2019. And in 2019, the total expenses one could take for these categories of expenses was $727. Two people, for example, could deduct $1,288. Whereas now, 5 years later, it's $808 for an individual and $1,411 for two people. Yes, it has increased, but has it increased enough to reflect the reality of our current financial environment? And I don't think so. The Consumer Price Index released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics last month shows us that the cost of living continues to steadily grow due to inflation. And a recent study I saw that released by Zillow shows that rent prices are about 30% higher on average than they were before the pandemic. Mortgage interest rates today for an average 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, they're hovering around 7%, which is the highest it's been in a little over 20 years. So, and that alone has made home ownership unaffordable for a lot of people. So there's just a lot going on. And for those who need the relief of bankruptcy, we have a little bit of an uphill battle in showing the court that for many people, these numbers don't truly reflect the reasonable amount of expenses that people are truly incurring. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, contact my office. If you want to stay up to date on developments in bankruptcy law and other related things, please click subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.